But happy National Armed Forces Day. What a great day to take time to recognize some of our veterans. Before we do that, can I ask all of our veterans, every one of you, to please stand. Thank you. Thank you for your service and for giving you your time and sacrificing your family and friends while you were away. You may have a seat. Well, wait, don't sit down yet. Sorry. I need to take a deep breath. Sorry. So we're going to start with the VFW Post 2006 presenting the colors, and then we're going to follow it by Kate Mazzaros as she sings the national anthem. So as you are able, please stand for the national anthems. And gentlemen, will you present the colors?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Forward, forward. Post colors. Present arms. Order arms. Right face. Order march.
You may have a seat. Thank you. My name is Colleen Munn. I am with PA Stitchers of Valor. We are the local chapter of the National Quilts of Valor Foundation. Quilts of Valor was started in 2003 by a grassroots quilter, Catherine Roberts, when her son was deployed to Iraq. She saw quilts as a way of comfort and healing to veterans battling their demons of war. Our mission is to present Quilts of Valor to service members and veterans who have been touched by war. She also states that a Quilt of Valor has the equivalent of a Purple Heart, only from a civilian. Since 2003, more than 216,000 Quilts of Valor have been made and presented to veterans across the United States, Germany, Afghanistan, and Iraq. How did the local chapter get started? A little over 2 years ago, I made my first 2 Quilts of Valor, one for my niece and one for her husband upon their retirement from the United States Navy. Shortly after that, the National Quilts of Valor Foundation contacted me and said, "Can you help us out with a nomination in our area?" And I said, "Sure, what's one more quilt?" Shortly thereafter, they contacted me again and said, "We have another nomination, can you help us out?" Well, I haven't started the first one, so I have 2 now. And shortly after that, they contacted me again, and like, okay, wait a second. I'm only one person. And I wasn't sure I had the funding for it. So I contacted our Free Spirit Quilt Guild, explained to them my presentations for my niece and nephew, talked to the president. She suggested that as a service project for our guild in 2017, that we would make and present Quilts of Valor to our veterans for that year. Well, we're in 2019 and we're still going. We also have other quilt guilds that have joined with us. We have a new group starting down in Hermitage also, so we're growing. In May of 2017, we had our first presentation to 11 veterans. As of this morning, we will have made and presented 135 Quilts of Valor to the veterans in this area. After today, thank you. After today, we will have presented 158 quilts. Now you say your math isn't correct. We had 135 and we're doing 12 today up here. We're also doing 12 more this afternoon. So we'll be at 158 before the day's over. The ladies that are coming up behind me are your Quilts of Valor group from this area. And we meet on a monthly basis to sew these quilts. So I'm going to have Kathy Winters be my Vanna. So I can explain to you what a Quilt of Valor is. It is not a charity quilt or a blanket. The top of the quilt, and this is just a small replica, yours are much bigger. The top of the quilt with its many pieces, colors, shapes, and sizes represent all of us here today, the individuals, communities, country, coming together to show our support for our veterans. The batting, the filler or warmth of the quilt represents the hope. The quilt will bring warmth, comfort, peace, and healing to the individual receiving it. The backing is the strength of the quilt. It represents the strength of the recipient, the support of his family, friends, and community. The quilting is what holds the quilt together. It represents the love, gratitude, and sometimes the tears of the makers. Like I said earlier, PA Stitchers of Valor gets together on a monthly basis to make each of these quilts. At that time, we share stories that I've heard from the veterans as I talk to them before a presentation, or from their family members, or after the presentation of what the quilt meant to them, or why they're here, why they are involved in Quilts of Valor, whether it's a family member, a friend, a loved one that has been serving or is serving, and that's when the tears start. Sometimes there's tears during the ceremony too if I don't get it taken care of. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our honor to be here today to award the following individuals with their Quilt of Valor on behalf of Quilts of Valor Foundation and the PA Stitchers of Valor. We ask each of you to come forward as I call your name. Please bring your spouse, friend, or loved one with you, if you have one, to help with the presentation. Ladies, if you want to take your spot with your quilts, please. This is where I get to hide. First, we're going to have Chief Petty Officer John D. Meyerhoff. We're going to start on this end. Hold the quilt up. John joined the Naval Reserves in 1953 in the Service Division. He was active duty in 1955 to 1968 in the United States Navy, with the last 5.5 years with the United States Marines. He was a combat medic. He served in Vietnam in 1960. He was assigned, I asked him about ships, and he started going on this real long list of ships that he was assigned to, but also naval hospitals. A couple of the ships were the USS Paul Revere and the USS Henry. He was also at the Bethesda Naval Hospital, Jacksonville, Triple Army, Valley Forge, and the list goes on. Thank you, Mr. Meyerhoff, for your service. Private, First Class, Jeffrey C. Britton. Mr. Britton, if you want to come up front, please. Do you want to come with them, please? We're going to have you come behind when you're done. Mr. Britton was in the U.S. Army during the Korean War. He's part of the Demolition Square Specialist HQ. He joined March 9th, 1953. His date of appointment was July 27th, 1955. He was honorably discharged from the Army in 1958. He then joined the Army Reserves for 8 years. He has a Purple Heart. Thank you, Mr. Britton, for your service. Okay. Fold it. Sergeant E5, Paul V. Pressey. Do you want to bring your wife with you? You can hold it up. Mr. Pressey was drafted into the United States Army from May 1953 to May 1955 during the Korean War conflict. He had a basic training in Fort Knox, then went to Texas as part of the 1st Armored Division. He was a personnel administrative specialist. Thank you, Mr. Pressey, for your service. Okay, go. Up here to the right. Okay. You stay right here. Lieutenant Cornell, Lieutenant Warren G. Hull.
This is directional.
It's directional.
Yes.
Mr. Hull is with the United States Army. He is retired. He started his career in the ROTC program at Gannon University. After graduation, he enlisted in the Army. He went to Vietnam as part of the Transportation Unit in 1968 to 1969. When he came home, he was in the reserves. While in the reserves, he led the reserve unit from Meadville. He also taught at the War College. He had 34 years of service. His services did not end there. He has been a Boy Scout leader for over 40 years, was past state president of the Reserves Officer Association. He is still very involved in the junior ROTC and the ROTC programs, going to the schools between Butler and Erie to promote and recruit for the programs. He's also part of the Mill Creek Area Community Band. He plays the saxophone. Thank you, Mr. Hall, for your service. Hope you get it.
Yeah, I got it.
Specialist 4, Carl L. Huck.
Watch the mic, Brian.
Mr. Huck joined the United States Army in 1963 and served until 1966 during the Vietnam War. He's part of the 1st Cavalry 27th Maintenance Ordnance Battalion, or in other words, the motor pole. For us civilians that are learning the jargon, his awards were Expert Rifleman, Sharpshooter, Vietnam Service, National Defense, and Overseas Bar. Thank you, Mr. Huck, for your service. Major Barbara S. Ellis. We don't always get a female veteran, so it's an honor to have one with us today. After graduating from Cambridge Springs High School in 1958, Barbara embarked on a career as an Army nurse and officer. After completing an Army Student Nurses program, Barbara finished basic training at Fort Sam Houston in Texas and joined the U.S. Army Nurses Corps. She first went to Opelika, Florida, to set up field hospitals so that they were prepared if the U.S. invaded Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We didn't invade. She then served at the 106th General Hospital in Yokohama, Japan, which was not a hospital but a collection of empty building that was used as an R&R center during the Korean conflict. She served there for 2 years. She headed back to the United States and served in Belvoir in Virginia, but not for long. She then went to Vietnam. She was medically evacuated out of Vietnam with back problems and sent to Walter Reed National Military Medical School in Maryland. After recovery, she had a stint serving in Kansas and was later sent to her last tour of duty in Hawaii. She left the military in 1978 after almost 18 years of service. She was recently honored at the governor's residence in Harrisburg for Female Veterans Day. She was one of 15 fellow veterans that were chosen out of 200 nominees. Thank you, Ms. Huck Ellis. Lance Corporal Thomas K. Allen. Mr. Allen enlisted in the United States Marines in 1967 at the age of 19. He served until 1968 and would have served longer had he not been wounded. He served in Vietnam as a rifleman. He was wounded in Quezon, Vietnam on Hill 471. I looked that up on the computer last night because I wanted to know a little bit more about this hill. The Battle of Quezon began in January of '68 when forces from the People's Army of North Vietnam carried out a massive artillery bombardment on U.S. Marines in Quezon, located in South Vietnam. For the next 77 days, U.S. Marines and their South Vietnamese allies fought off an intense surge of garrison, one of the longest and bloodiest battles of Vietnam. April 3rd, the Marines were ordered to attack on Hill 471 as a strategic plan to a place of terrain according to the command view of the base. After heavy artillery preparation, the Marines seized the hill. So it was a dominant hill that oversees their base, so they wanted to make sure it was covered. So thank you, Mr. Allen. Specialist 4, John W. Sheets. Mr. Sheets was in the United States Navy Reserves during high school. After graduation, he went into the United States Army in 1957 during the Korean War conflict. He was 98% petroleum. He was one of the fuel haulers. He was in Ijeon, Korea, and then went to Seoul, Korea for R&R. He was a sergeant of arms of the Vietnam Post 52. Thank you, Mr. Sheets. Staff Sergeant Victor Collier. Mr. Collier was in the Air Force from 1951 to 1955 during the Korean War. He loaded and unloaded bombs on the M-51 Mustang aircraft. He was Staff Sergeant when he was discharged. He is 89 years old with his birthday on November 10th, 1929. Thank you, Mr. Collier, for your service. E5, Russell McKenzie. Russell was in the United States Army from 1965 to 1968. He was a crew chief and was responsible for making sure the aircraft were manned, including the helicopters and the fixed wings. He served in Korea for 13 months and then volunteered to serve in Vietnam for 1 year. He was part of the 209th Reconnaissance 4th Entry Division. He has an Air Medal and occupational awards for Korean and Vietnam Wars. Thank you, Mr. McKenzie, for your service. Airman David G. Glover. Mr. Glover enlisted in the United States Air Force in 1970 and served until 1971 during the Vietnam War. He was with the security police. He would have served longer had he not been wounded. He has a Purple Heart. Thank you, Mr. Glover, for your service. Janet, you're going to need to move the chair. Specialist E5, Joe Schrader. Mr. Schrader joined the PA Armory National Guard in January 1971 with an honorable discharge. He was first attached to the Troop Bravo, 1st Squadron, 104th Armored Cavalry Unit in Chambersburg, PA. He received training in the Army Armor Center Alpha Copy A and 12th Battalion, 5th Brigade, 1st Army, Fort Knox, Kentucky, as a unit supply clerk. He later moved from Franklin County to Clearfield County and transferred to the local National Guard unit in Puxatawney, PA. The unit in Puxatawney was Bravo Company B-876, Engineering Battalion Combat. He became a crawler tractor operator, which was the same as his civilian job he held in the open pit coal mines. He didn't need any further training for that. While in Chambersburg, he was activated to serve during the Hurricane Agnes floods, helping in rescuing civilians and property from floodwaters. Thank you, Mr. Schrader. Each quilt is presented. It's not given out like a book or magazine, but with a hug. On one end of the quilt is one of the quilters from PA Stitchers of Valor, representing the quilters across the United States. On the other side is a family member or close friend. Ladies, please present your quilt. It's kind of close quarters, but the reason for the hug is so that when you are feeling alone, battling the demons of war, or just having a bad day, you again can wrap the quilt around yourself and feel the hug that you just received. And remember, you are not alone. You have the love and support and gratitude of all of us, family, friends, quilters, community, and country. With each quilt comes a certificate which states, "The Quilts of Valor Foundation wishes to recognize you for your service to our nation. We consider it a privilege to honor you. Though we may never know the extent of your sacrifice and service to protect and defend the United States of America, as an expression of our gratitude, we award you this Quilt of Valor." Also, there is a presentation case or a pillowcase that the ladies have under their chairs for you. As of today, the story of the quilt becomes your story. We hope you will keep the quilt with you as a tangible reminder that there are thousands of men and women across the country who are forever in your debt. Again, it has been an honor for us to be here today to present these Quilts of Valor. Thank you, veterans, for your service, and you are dismissed. But please, can we get some pictures? Thank you all for also commenting.